Welcome to Fat Chicks on Top. This podcast contains frank discussions about the body, sexuality, and occasionally uses swear words, which may not be appropriate for people under the age of 18. This podcast also uses facts, statistics, and mathematics, which may not be appropriate for liberal arts majors. And this podcast relies on science and reality, which may not be appropriate for evangelicals. Welcome to Fat Chicks on Top. You're here today with your host, Auntie Vice, and I'm very excited to be back for our new season. It is early January 2023, and I am here with Princessa Natasha Strange. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I've been a follower of yours for a long time. You do some really interesting work. For our listeners who may not be as familiar with you, because we do have quite a few Kinksters who listen to this, Natasha runs Sub Rosa in Portland, which is the only female-owned dungeon in the area. She's been doing this work for almost 30 years now. She's written one book. She has another one coming out on Kink, Kinky for the Curious Girls. She teaches, she coaches, she does all sorts of things. So let's start. 30 years. This makes you a long-term pro.
Long-term pro. Yeah, I do a lot of mentoring of up-and-coming sex workers, and most of them were born after I started, which is always sort of weird. Just like...
My sister now has a rule: she can't hire anybody who's younger than her oldest tattoo.
Yeah, it's something like that. I do a lot of like diaper play, and it's to the point where now I am actually putting people and humiliating them about being in diapers, because that's my niche, who were like in diapers when I, first started putting people in diapers.
So things have changed dramatically. For anybody who's gotten into the kink scene in the last 10 years, it looks nothing like it did 30 years ago.
Oh my God. Nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I was just finding out about it 30 years ago when I was a teen, and holy smoke, things have changed. So how did you come into this world? Because it's so different than people do now.
So I was living in San Francisco, and personally, I came into the kink world like you do, in the mid-90s, which is through your local goth club. So I was always like, if you go back and read any of my interviews, I've always been kinky and weird. I've never been socially acceptable. I was raised in a way that, we didn't have TV, and we didn't so pop culture just totally escaped me. And I just got used to being socially inappropriate. And so I was always interested in sex, and kinky sex especially, and lots of it. And then I was putting myself through college, and I always had like several jobs because I, had weird class times and stuff. And somebody was like, I got laid off from my main job, and somebody was like, I know you're kinky because like you go to all these goth clubs. There's this fetish and fantasy house in the East Bay of San Francisco called Fantasy Makers, and they're always looking to hire, and you can make some money there. And I figured I would work there until I finished school. I think I started in like February of 95. I graduated, and the week I graduated, I was on the cover of San Francisco Examiner, and the local sex rag, The Spectator. And so my family's in town, including my young children. And I was on the cover of like the old fashioned newspaper stands. I was all over. And the thought of applying to get to go to graduate school at that point was just, yeah, no, I'm having fun.
And that's the crazy thing to me, because I went to graduate school and you couldn't major in anything around alternative sexualities. Like queer studies was about as, and now there's whole BDSM studies segments of universities. It's insane to me.
It's
Weird, but
insane. It's
right.
It's so crazy. And I mean, but the thing is, with me, even at that point, I had so much like weird, I was pretty open to my family about what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I still had so much, like, this wasn't a career.
Right.
Jesus, this isn't like something you do until you're like in your 50s. Jeez, this is something you do like, while you're sowing your wild oats.
So how did it end up being a career?
Accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
Because I went back and I definitely decided I didn't want to get my master's in business, which was what my undergrad was in. And so I got a front end web development certification. I got a Unix system administration certification because the nerd runs deep. And then literally the first day I got like a job in sysadmin. And my first day, I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to be walking around to people's desks and leaning over and saying, well, have you tried rebooting it? and I was just like, no. And I had another job for a while and I got laid off. And basically they laid me off, gave me 4 weeks of severance and handed me my computer. And because I was the only female engineer, I had the nicest computer. And I was like, I'm going home and making porn, putting my website back up. I'm like, not that it ever came down, but it would get, I was updated.
Mm-hmm.
The bitch is back. Come on, let's do it. It was always, I kept trying to do what, you're supposed to do and figure out what it is you're going to do for a living. And apparently open dungeons and educate people about kink is what I'm doing, because I'm 53, going to be 54 a couple weeks after this airs. And here I am.
It's the way the best careers work out. I did not go to grad school to do this full time, and yet here I am.
No, I literally, oh my God, it must have been 10 years ago, went to this, I used to go to Blog Her, which was this amazing 5,000 women, just mostly femmes, 5,000 people talking. And I remember doing this workshop where we're supposed to like visually draw out our career to figure out where we're going. And the person who was running it knew me. And so she's going around to these big tables and she's handing out paper to everybody. And there's all these pencils and stuff. And she comes to me and she's talking to the class and like telling us what we're going to do. And she comes to me and she hands me a piece of paper. And then she looks back down at me and she just like hands me another one and then another one. And another one. So like, Jen just kept walking. I was like, yes, my careers. Yeah.
So this far into it, what has it taught you? What have you learned about yourself in doing this for 30 years? Because kink is very revelatory.
Oh my God. And kink and sex work and everything has changed so much. I wish that I had just taken this more seriously as a business. I mean, I always took it serious. Like when I answered my phone, I was like 10 to noon. 10 to noon didn't matter. I could be like hungover, having been in bed for about 4 minutes. 10 o'clock would roll around, my phone would ring, and I'd be like, oh God, oh God. And, hello. Yeah. I'm actually in the middle of something. If you could call me back tomorrow, we'll chat then, okay? Hang up and be like, oh God. So like I always took it professionally, but like I did not ever expect to be doing this for 30 years, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I really wish that I had taken it more serious. I don't know, but at the same time, I'm very, very strong believer of everything that I've gone through makes me who I am. It makes me appreciate what I am. I do a lot of coaching of femmes and couples now, and I don't think that if I hadn't had the struggles that I've had in my past, that I would be able to have the empathy and the understanding to talk to them and really know what they're going through. So,
That makes a lot of sense. In getting into this, you've gone, you're very femme presenting, tapping into the dominant side is not what most of us, femme presenting AFAB people are taught, right? We're supposed to be demure and quiet, and especially in the generation you and I are raised, because we're about 3 years apart. Yeah. How did you come to find your dominant voice?
Oh, that was a rocky road. That was a rocky, rocky road. So yeah, I'm sure your listeners understand, but like from the time femme people are in diapers, we are trained to be clean, to make sure everybody likes us, to be pretty, to have frills, to be presentable. Yeah. So and to be nice. Oh my God, gotta be nice. Everybody has to like you. Don't do that. What will people think? Oh God. So when I started at Fantasy Makers, I started as a switch, and I wasn't planning on making this a career, obviously. So I was like, I am going to have fun with this. And Fantasy Makers is much more of a fetish and fantasy house. It's not like a house of domination. It was, a playhouse. So it allowed me to explore my creative side. Like I did a lot of weird role plays and, just over the top costumey, cosplay stuff, which now everybody does. But back then,
yeah,
I was the weirdo. I was everybody else is Domina, mistress, goddess. And I was like, I'm Natasha the cat. I want to enact your favorite graphic novel,
It's awesome.
So, and then on top of that, all of the dominant women around me, because I was starting, to get to know all of these amazing independents. And they were just so together. They were so put together. They were so perfect. And I just looked up to them and I did not see myself in any of them. I did not see, I was goofy. I was not put together. I was so I had to work really hard to find my dominant voice. And I just remember a couple of times when I was first playing where I was spending a lot of time worrying about what it was my play partner wanted and what they were expecting. And was I living up to their expectations? Was I doing what they wanted? And all of a sudden it just a couple of years in started clicking. And I realized that I've negotiated with them, and negotiation back then was not what it is now. No, it was hi, how you doing? Yeah. You want me to stick something in your butt? Okay, great. Let's go. But I started realizing that I'm in this room. I have all these toys. I have somebody who just wants me to use these toys on them. And if I can't have fun with this person, maybe it's on me. And maybe it's I don't worry about what it is that they want. And if I'm doing it right and if I'm making them happy. It was just this epiphany. And I was it was huge for me. Yeah. And that was when, that was when I I started having repeat clients that were coming back to me. It was when I started having I mean, I was always having fun in my job, but that it took that worry out, and it was a long ways to that epiphany. That epiphany, that's, there could be, I could talk all day about like the weird, like misunderstandings and just, yeah. But that was also when I started doing more negotiation, and bigger negotiations, which weren't, it wasn't that big of a deal 30 years ago to like, what do you want to feel like? That was just, nobody asked.
I never asked that.
No. So, and then that was also when I started getting to be well known for doing role play and a lot of gender exploration. And so more people were coming to me. And so they knew what I was known for. I was also one of the first Dommes to have a website. And I discovered this really cool thing. I don't even remember how I discovered it. It was the first person that I knew to discover this. And like, it blew my mind. It was called WordPress. And you could just like update with pictures and thoughts at any time, multiple times a day, so I like would write about what happened in session, and I would write about my life. And sometimes it was like one sentence about going to a baseball game, or something. But my clients were just like, oh, so that really helped people, so it was sort of us meeting each other in the middle kind of thing, at that point. And then it, stepping into my dominance became more about setting boundaries and, both with clients and with family. And I do a lot of boundary talking now because, yeah.
So you mentioned how consent has changed, right? And yeah, at the time you and I were coming into it, it was really like, you like to be hit? Cool. I like to hit things. Cool. And like, that was about it, right? It was not.
Femme at a sexy party, you must be a bottom. I'm going to hit you.
Right.
I'm going to touch
exactly.
you. Being at the party was consent.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously it's radically changed now. I've seen consent negotiation forms by some educators that are putting out, they're like 12 pages long. Mm-hmm. For me, I think there's a happy medium, but where do you fall on what needs to go into consent anymore? Because there's now 100 different options for it.
Right. So there's the consent and there's the negotiation for me, because I'm a professional and I have to negotiate and get consent very quickly, because most people are coming to see me. Many of them are cis men and they have an erection and time is of an essence. And often more cis men are starting to evaluate like what it is that they're there for. But it can still be hard for them to like look at like the emotions behind like why they're there. So in my intake form, I do ask a lot of questions about how do you like to feel emotionally? Like what emotions are you looking for in this session? And as in addition to all of the like physical activities, because physical activities are so secondary. Like if if you don't know what emotions you're going for in kink, what you want to feel, what your submissive wants to feel, it doesn't matter what the activities are, because you'll be doing them wrong. So, and then that leads into another rant about doing kink wrong. But then consent, I like to call consent like the real 50 Shades of Grey, because consent, we hear a lot about enthusiastic consent, but you can be enthusiastic and consent and be drunk, which drunk, you've negated all of that. So, and then there's the why are you consenting, and the ones, I like to bring up like we just went through the holidays. How many of us consented to go spend the holidays with family? We consented to that, but we didn't like with our whole heart and soul consent. We like, and so that's just not how you want to have sex.
Yeah.
So, and you need to realize why the other person is consenting to play with you. Are they consenting because that's how, what they feel like they're expected to do? Are they expected to, like if somebody's coming to me to play with me, do they think they have to be in diapers and be humiliated because that's what I like to do? So you have to look at all of those reasons that you're doing and why your partner is doing. And as a responsible, ethical dominant, you need to know why your submissive is submitting.
And that you bring up a key point, is a hard conversation to have, especially with cis men. We don't teach people how to understand those emotions of why they're doing things, right? This is not part of our sex ed at all. So for somebody who hasn't had a lot of experience discussing the whys of the consent and the emotions, is there a way to start providing somebody the basic language around that?
I definitely like to start by throwing out some emotions, like how do you like to feel when you're submissive? What is it that you're, and like by giving them a bunch of options, which I do on my intake form, it helps them narrow it down. And it, because a lot of times they will just, I masturbate and look at this porn, and like, doesn't everybody like, there's somebody getting tied up and it makes me horny. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a lot of times they don't even think that there's other reasons like to look at that and like other emotions that it invokes. Everybody feels like that though when they're first starting out.
Yeah. When you're doing coaching, how much of the coaching, especially of new sex workers coming into the field, is more around the whys and the psychology versus the actual physical acts that you do?
It really depends. And I do a lot of coaching with up and coming sex workers, but I also do a ton of coaching with people who are not interested in being sex workers. So it really depends on where they're coming from. I've worked with people who came, who had a good grasp of the understanding, and they just wanted to have the technical aspects. And so then we focus on the technical aspects while talking about how using different techniques is going to evoke different emotions. And sometimes it's just sometimes coaching is nothing but sitting and looking at stuff and talking. Everybody starts at a different place, and everybody has set those little voices in your head that start when you're young, where you're just like, oh, the perverts, look at the perverts. I'm not one of those perverts, but I like it. So, I'm so serious. I listened to your last interview and it was like all politics and polished, and here I am making like little faces.
I'll have to direct you to a few others where we're not nearly as polished. Yeah. So you talk about starting out as a switch and then getting into role play. How did you come to specialize in humiliation and diaper play and forced feminization and all of those really fun things?
I specialize in emasculation. I like to say that I am taking down the patriarchy one pantied ass at a time. I don't, there's just something about laughing at men when they're in this vulnerable space, but still so turned on, that just really gets me. It's like releasing that inner mean girl that I spent far too long like biting my tongue, trying not to be like, oh, yeah. And so now now it's just like I have unleashed, I have permission, I have given myself permission, I have, so people come in. I just had this little cutie come in for a bondage session, and he's all like ripped, and he's like sort of like, I touched his arm when I was restraining his hand up, and he sort of flexed his muscles like, oh, you like your little water guns here, don't ya? It's like, because I don't know, that's my fetish, making fun of men.
I identify so strongly with that. Like, I used to top this like 6'4" white construction worker, and he'd come over before we both went to work in the morning. And there's just something about putting him in panties and cheerleader socks and making him cry that made my day great.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that it's not a malicious act. It's not that I hate men. I do hate their patriarchy, and I do hate everything that it's done to everybody of every gender, and especially men. Like, and men don't realize how badly the patriarchy fucks them. The patriarchy and like that whole, I make my living off of providing a safe place for masculine people to process the damage that the patriarchy has inflicted upon them. I provide a place where men can come and be the object of desire. They can be pursued. They can enjoy silky things. They can enjoy emotions. They can get emotional and cry. Like, it's so much more than like that typical like pop culture, like, oh, you go to a dominatrix so you can not be in control for a while. Oh, it's so much deeper than that. Yeah.
It is. And I think that's a lot that gets lost in the representation of this. And I think you tapped into it, that kink can be very healing for many of us.
So healing for everybody.
Yeah. You found that in your own journey, that it's been healing. And
definitely. When I was a young troublemaker, I lived on the streets for a while with a drug addiction, and then married somebody who was basically my dealer. We got clean and had kids and entered into a 7-year, very, very abusive relationship. Coming out of that relationship, I, like any violence against women, any violence in general, like any aggressive men, just floored me. Like, I just, like, my heart would stop, my mouth would go dry, and like I just couldn't function. And that's like in life, in movies, like in, just anywhere. I remember watching Thelma and Louise and having to like shut myself off for some of that. And kink has really helped me embrace who I am. It has helped me embrace, and especially starting as a switch that helped me work through a lot of, a switch like professionally to men. That helped me work through a lot of my feelings, probably as much as any of, I did therapy as well, but like, talk therapy will get you someplace, but like, actually I'm a hands-on learner. So I needed, like, yeah.
I've told more than one person you need both types of CBT to truly heal.
Yes. So yeah, like I told you, my journey's been all over the place.
So you opened the first female-owned dungeon play space in the Seattle area. I think in all of Oregon, actually, right now.
In Portland. Yeah, we're in Portland.
Or Portland, yeah.
In Oregon. My business partner, Viola Parker, and I opened Subrosa just over 4 years ago. It is a play space, education space. We work out of there, both doing power exchange as well as coaching sessions. Every month we have something called FemDomme Bootcamp, which femmes and queers get to come and learn how to do the hands-on stuff. It's not so much of the psychological, but it's definitely like, do you want to learn how to tie up a penis? Because it's a lot easier if there's no emotional connection. Let me provide a penis. You want to learn how to tie up a vulva? We've got one of those over here for you too. And so And then I teach like impact play and some other things. We try to have a couple of classes on the calendar. And then on top of that, we rent the space to couples and thruples who want a place that is not their bedroom to explore, or a sex club. So we have a lot of sex clubs in Portland.
Well, and it's a beautiful space. For listeners, you can go online. I'll have the link to the site and you can get the 3D tour. It is pristine. Like it is so beyond anything you saw in How to Build a Sex Room. It's so amazing.
Because we wanted something that was very Instagrammable. We wanted pretty. And just dungeons are so often dark, and yeah, it's not all black, and yeah. So
and you've turned it into a co-working space, which is amazing, and so Portland. Like this could be straight out of Portlandia as the co-working sex space.
We are in the process of changing that a bit. But yeah, we have a co-working space for erotic entrepreneurs. And so it's just a great place for them to meet other people. Because like, I can't really teach you anything. Actually, Viola and I, neither one of us are big content people, but like, there's a lot of people who join the group and then meet people to collab with. And like, there's just, we do all the same things any other co-working space would do, but it's for erotic entrepreneurs, mostly kinky ones. So
that's awesome. So you have a new book coming out. You want to talk a little bit about it and what's going on with that? Because there's a whole lot around that coming up.
There's a whole lot around that. So I released the book, originally released it several years ago as Kinky Sex Tips for Curious Girls. At that point in my life, I was working mainly with, very traditional, like girl married to a boy, has some kids, likes to do like choking, but doesn't know anything about safe words kind of people. So I was, that all that language made sense to me. Now I'm working with a lot of gender queer people, a lot of femmes that are not necessarily identifying. And so I modernized the language. It's just called Kink for the Curious now. There's some updated photos. It's not photos. There's some updated color pages. I updated modernized some of the words around consent, and then worked with an amazing editor to just go through and get rid of a whole lot of typos. But what it is, it's an activity book modeled after the activity books that you had when you were a kid. So there are color pages and word finds and, crossword puzzles and, there's like a color a dick page. And it's very whimsical, very fun, and very, very entry level. It's the kind of thing that you give your friend if your friend is, not understanding what you see in kink. It's very approachable. And even though the language has changed, the heart remains the same, that it is for people who have lived or are living the female experience, the femme experience. So I start out talking about body image, and that sort of thing before moving on to activities and emotional needs. And then we go into, because there are two things in there for negotiation. And one is a negotiation sheet like I use when I intake clients and coaching clients that, is like, what are you afraid of? What would you do in the right situation? What are your hard limits? And then like a whole list of activities that you can check off or cross out. But then in addition to that, there's a slave contract, a submission contract, because that is not something, it's a great negotiation tool. Because like the kids go off to grandma's for the weekend and you have like 48 hours where you and your partner can like live the life, and you can sit there and go through and figure out like, what are the rules this week and while the kids are gone, kind of thing. So it's a really fun, approachable way to start learning about kink, And then
you have a class that goes with it, right?
Yeah, and this is the terrifying. I've given myself a bit of a fear boner on this class, because I originally wrote the book to be a textbook for this class, and then ended up opening Sub Rosa, and the book, I never even really advertised it. Um, I a bit, but it was available at like Good Vibrations for a while, and but anyway, I opened Sub Rosa, and then all of a sudden I have like this physical space to run and maintain and to love all over. But in the end of January, I may push it 2 weeks because I've had some family things come up. There's going to be a class that goes along with the book. And so every week we will work through a chapter together. It'll be like a sort of conversation with me about the topic. I'm going to have some friends come in to, like Princess Callie's going to come in and talk about the bitch.
Oh, good.
The bitch stigma, her book. And then I have a submissive who's going to come in and talk about what he gets out of being submissive, and like so little AMAs with, some interesting people, interesting friends of mine. But it's 8 weeks, and it is also just about camaraderie and because you can listen to this podcast and learn a lot. You can read my book and learn a lot. But it's all theoretical. Like, to be able to do that with a bunch of people and have a community is so terribly, terribly important. So
you have to have it to really develop that and people to talk about stuff with.
Yeah, and to not feel othered, because it's like theoretically in our brains, we're like, oh yeah, everybody is, like there's lots of people into kink now, but they're those people. They're not me. They're not, So having a community of other people where you can get to know them and be like, oh yeah, everybody here is sort of like me in a way.
Yeah. No, I do the same thing with my intensive, except it's over 30 days instead of 8 weeks. And the folks who go through that then remain connected afterward, because you've got to develop some type of support system where you're like, I just need to talk through this. And they're going through kind of the same stuff you are. Like, that's how you come into this. That's what I loved about it. There's always some community you can find.
Yeah. And it is like when I provide that community and like then I see people connecting, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I fostered that. And like, look at them go now. Because we have people come to FemDomme Bootcamp, and then we'll turn around at, some kinky party and turn around, and like 3 or 4 of them will be like together, and they're like, we all met at FemDomme Bootcamp, and like now we like are wingmen and like go out to all these sex parties, and it's so amazing to watch that. It's amazing.
It is. It is. And for any of my listeners who've taken classes from me, they know your FemDomme Bootcamp is one of the resources I always recommend, because it is, to be a dominant femme is a whole special set of skills. It's not something you can get from your average dominant support group where it's mostly men. Like, there's something very unique about being a FemDom that you've got to have another group of FemDoms around.
Yeah, I mean, because it is all about flipping that script that we've been raised with, and like leaning into the fact that, we can be that mean girl. We can like poke and prod and like explore and like, and we didn't even get into like claiming your sexuality. Like, it's all about like claiming your sexuality, because we're shamed, it's like we're supposed to be like prude, not know anything about sex. Oh no. And then like, one day we turn 23 and we get married, and it's like, woohoo, with this one person behind closed doors, we can be whatever we want, do whatever we want. But then you're like, the fuck is it that I want?
Right? We're never taught how to get to that point. That's been my rant for the last 3 years, is in sex ed, we've got to teach about the emotional side. Like, you can teach how to put a condom on a banana, cool. But the emotional side is what we really need to teach kids how to deal with, because that is so much more of the experience than the physical side.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I was definitely just raised with like that obsession with the physical side. But it is so, and that's why I think that if, the more we teach our kids to, turn down physical touch that they don't want from relatives and, just to embrace being whoever they want, like gender wise, and like letting them explore their sexuality. And my 13-year-old identifies as a lesbian. Like, and I've had people be, how can she know that at 13? Because she's attracted, but she hasn't even had sex yet. Has she had sex? And like,
you don't
have, like, I identify as queer and I'm in a somewhat monogamous relationship with a man.
Mm-hmm.
But doesn't stop me from being queer. She may not, like, just like, oh God. Let people do their thing.
Well, and in doing that, you so undermine the patriarchy and rape culture is what I love about it. Because it's like, this is how you set boundaries when you're 12. As you say, Grandma, I'm not into giving you a hug, and I'm not going to rub your bunions for 25 cents. Like, I got a limit here. We're good.
But maybe $1.
Yeah. I have a 10-year-old nephew, and his powers of negotiation are incredible. And he has a really highly inflated sense of his self-worth. So all the prices go away. And he's like, you can deposit it into my Venmo account beforehand. Like,
damn. Nice. Now if we can get all the femmes on board to do that as well. So
exactly. Well, that, and then they were doing homeschooling during the early part of the pandemic. And at one point, his teacher had called on him. He'd been half listening in like one headphone and playing the game. And he comes up and he answers, and he turns to his mom, he's mutes it, and he says, I don't even know what she was talking about. I just kind of half-assed that answer. And I'm like, between that and like deposit it in my Venmo before I do something, you're ready for the corporate world. Like, you've learned your lessons.
That kid's gonna be fine.
Yeah. No, we just need to get others to embrace that. So for our listeners who want to find you, who want to find your book, your FemDomme Bootcamp, the classes that go with everything, to find Sub Rosa, plug all your things.
All the things. You can learn about me at kittenwithawhip.com. You can learn about my course at wickedminx.com and learn about why it's Wicked Minx. You can learn about Subrosa at subrosapdx.com. But really, if you go to kittenwithawhip.com, you will see all the things and find me in all the places. So I do try to keep that updated.
And listeners, we will have all of those links in the show notes, as well as links to Natasha's book. And like I said, if you've ever taken a class of mine, I regularly recommend her. So please check out. She's a great teacher, great newsletter, fantastic space. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, thank you.
And now, a moment of gratitude.
I am currently so grateful to be able to live in Portland, Oregon, which is just so queer and open. I'm currently so grateful for my business partner and our business to, we can run it openly and teach so many people about kink and BDSM and provide a safe place emotionally and physically to explore. I'm really grateful for where I am in my career. And yeah, I feel very privileged to be here.
This has been an episode of Fat Chicks on Top. Fat Chicks on Top is produced and hosted by Auntie Vice. Audio production is by A Serious Production. You can find all information about Fat Chicks on Top at fatchicksontop.com and follow Auntie Vice at Auntie Vice on most social media.